Indonesia, a nation of over 17,000 islands, has a rich and diverse cultural heritage. Among the many customs and traditions practiced throughout the archipelago is the ancient art of headhunting. For centuries, headhunting was a central aspect of many Indonesian cultures, serving as a symbol of power, prestige, and spiritual significance. In this video, we will explore the history of headhunting in Indonesia, tracing its roots from prehistoric times to the present day. We will examine the cultural and religious beliefs that underpinned this practice, as well as the impact it had on Indonesian society and its people. We will also delve into the various forms of headhunting that existed in Indonesia, from the ritualized and ceremonial practices of some cultures to the violent and brutal methods employed by others. Join us as we take a journey through the fascinating and complex history of headhunting in Indonesia, exploring the customs, beliefs, and practices of this ancient tradition that continues to shape the country's cultural identity to this day. Before we learn more about Indonesia, make sure to subscribe so you can stay updated as we enter the age of Asia. Headhunting in Indonesia refers to the traditional practice of taking an enemy's head as a symbol of victory in battle. The practice was once widespread throughout the archipelago and played an important role in the cultural and religious beliefs of many indigenous communities. In some cultures, the taking of a head was seen as a way of transferring the spiritual essence of the enemy to the headhunter, giving them additional power and strength. The practice of headhunting has a long and complex history in Indonesia. It has now largely died out, surviving only in a few remote regions. Despite this, the legacy of headhunting lives on in the many cultural practices and beliefs that are still deeply ingrained in Indonesian society. Pre-colonial era, before 1500s. Headhunting was an established practice among several ethnic groups in Indonesia prior to the arrival of European colonizers. It was believed to have religious significance and was often used as a way to appease the gods and seek their favor. Headhunting was also seen as a way to gain social status and to prove one's bravery and prowess in battle. One of the most well-known ethnic groups to practice headhunting were the Dayak people, who inhabited the interior regions of the island of Borneo. The Dayak believed that the head was the source of a person's spiritual power, and that by taking an enemy's head, they could gain access to this power. They also believed that taking heads helped to protect their communities from harm and to bring prosperity and fertility to their crops. Headhunting was also practiced by other ethnic groups in Indonesia, including the Nias people of Sumatra, the Asmat people of Papua, and the Toraja people of Sulawesi. In each of these cultures, the practice of headhunting was deeply ingrained and played an important role in their social, religious, and political systems. Colonial era, 1500s 1945. The arrival of European colonizers in Indonesia had a significant impact on the practice of headhunting. Many colonizers saw the practice as barbaric and worked to eradicate it, often through violent means. The Dutch colonizers, in particular, were known for their efforts to suppress headhunting among the Dayak people of Borneo. They employed a strategy known as the Pacification campaign, in which they used force to subdue and control the Dayak. As part of this campaign, they targeted headhunters and confiscated their weapons, often resorting to violence and intimidation to achieve their goals. Despite these efforts, headhunting persisted in many parts of Indonesia throughout the colonial era. Some groups continued to practice it in secret, while others adapted the practice to meet the changing circumstances of their societies. For example, some Dayak communities began to take the heads of animals instead of humans, while others focused on collecting skulls as a symbol of their cultural heritage. Post-independence era, 1945 to the present. Following Indonesia's independence from the Netherlands in 1945, the practice of headhunting gradually declined. The Indonesian government made efforts to eradicate the practice, and many communities voluntarily abandoned it as they modernized and became more integrated into mainstream Indonesian society. The spiritual significance of headhunting in Indonesia was a complex and deeply rooted belief system that was closely tied to the cultural and religious practices of many indigenous communities. For these societies, the act of taking an enemy's head was not just an act of physical violence, but also a deeply spiritual practice that was seen as a way of gaining power and prestige. In many Indonesian cultures, The head was believed to be the seat of a person's spiritual essence, and taking an enemy's head was seen as a way of transferring this essence to the headhunter. This belief was rooted in the idea that the head contained a person's soul or life force, and that by taking it, the headhunter would gain a portion of that power. While headhunting was often associated with violence and brutality, many Indonesian cultures developed highly ritualized practices that governed the taking of a head. These practices were designed to ensure that the headhunter would not incur the wrath of the gods or bring shame upon their community. In some cultures, the headhunter would have to undergo a period of purification before embarking on a headhunting expedition. They would be required to fast and engage in other spiritual practices in order to prepare themselves for the task ahead. Once a head had been taken, it would often be ritually displayed, either as a trophy or as a means of appeasing the gods. Some cultures would even hold elaborate ceremonies to celebrate the taking of a head, with feasting, dancing, and other forms of merriment. As Indonesia began to modernize and become more integrated into the global community, the practice of headhunting began to decline. This was due in part to the efforts of colonial powers, who viewed headhunting as a barbaric practice and sought to stamp it out. Today, headhunting is largely a thing of the past in Indonesia. While it is still practiced in a few remote regions, it is no longer a widespread or socially acceptable practice. Nonetheless, the legacy of headhunting lives on in the many cultural practices and beliefs that continue to shape Indonesian society. The impact of headhunting on Indonesian society and people has been significant. The practice led to the loss of countless lives and caused fear and terror among communities. It also resulted in the displacement of people from their homes and communities, leading to cultural disintegration and the loss of traditional knowledge and practices. Furthermore, the practice of headhunting reinforced a culture of violence and aggression, leading to ongoing conflicts and tensions between different communities. It also had a profound impact on the mental health of individuals, causing trauma, anxiety, and depression. Today, efforts are being made to preserve and celebrate the traditional cultures of Indonesian indigenous communities without resorting to violence or practices like headhunting. These efforts include cultural festivals, museums, and educational programs that seek to promote understanding and respect for different cultures while also preserving their unique traditions and practices. Continue to keep track of the journey into the Age of Asia. Subscribe to this channel so we can become a leading channel in telling the story of the largest continent on Earth.